Spoke sniffer is an old term for people who love the technical aspects of a bike, so I consider it a compliment. Spokes are not only a critical part of a bike, but can also cost more than either the hubs or the rims on a wheel. They're not as simple as they appear. Of course, low-end spokes are inexpensive, but if you get the top-of-the-line spoke like a CX Race, they are very expensive, as much as $4 per spoke. While many expensive components are protected by patents, most spokes are protected by trade secrets. Each manufacturer has a special proprietary formula for both the steel alloy and the process of manufacturing them. Most quality spoke makers buy their wire from Sandvik. There are a number of good spoke makers. I use Sapin, but DT Swiss, Wheelsmith, and Pillar are also very good spokes. Most of the top level riders use Sapin, but I think some of that is because they're made in Belgium, which is one of the centers for pro cycling. My first journey into spokes came in a very unusual way. I was getting into the wheel business in Taiwan. The hot set of wheels at that time were the Mavic Ceriums with the large Aero aluminum spokes. I met with Richmond, a large Taiwanese spoke maker, and I asked them to make steel spokes with the big Aero blade. I wanted them in both steel and titanium. When they sent me the samples, I built up a couple of sets of wheels and gave one of each, one titanium and one steel, to Jim Langley, who incidentally has a great YouTube channel on bikes. I'll put the link below. I ran into him at a bike show a couple of months later, and he said he got less than a mile with the titanium spokes before they started breaking. But the steel spokes have served me well, and I sold thousands of sets of wheels under my Nuvation brand. Another odd incident happened when I was at the bike show and Mike Sinyard stopped by. Mike is the founder of Specialized, and I knew him from the 90s. He picked my brain about wheels for a half an hour. Mark's a sharp product guy, so I was flattered by his interest. Spokes, along with their configuration, often define the appearance of a wheel. The large Aero spoke, and to a lesser extent straight pull spokes, look fancy, but it's largely cosmetic. I know that'll ruffle some feathers, but let's face it, we all love cool looking gear. The thick bladed spoke is obvious in its different appearance. Mavic scooped the market by getting the top pros to ride them. Many people fell in love with the unique look, and myself included. Straight pull spokes make the hub look super cool. Not to be forgotten, Trek started using Rolf wheels with their paired spoking. Rolf has a patent that claimed performance advantages, but I would question that. But the main reason they became popular was their unique appearance. And of course, they were on all the Trek bikes. Outside of nice designs, what are the important aspects of a spoke? First, I'm only going to address stainless steel spokes, which are used by the vast majority of many wheel makers. There's a lot of confusion here, but it boils down to the basics of durability and weight. Aerodynamics is a factor, but the best way to make spokes more aerodynamic is to reduce the number of spokes in each wheel. When you do that, durability is more important than the actual aerodynamic quality because the low spoke count puts a lot more stress on each spoke. There are three somewhat common diameters of spokes of the wire, 13, 14, and 15 gauge, that are 2.3, 2.0, and 1.8 millimeters wide. The spokes can be straight gauge, double or triple butted, or bladed in either straight pull or J-bend. The butted spokes are not stretched but rolled and peened, which is cold-forging process that increases the strength. Spokes fail by fatigue, not ultimate strength, and the butted spokes have a longer life than a straight gauge, but this is only true for each specific gauge. That is, a 14 gauge double butted spoke, which is 2.0 millimeter, lasts longer than a straight one, but a 13 gauge, which is a 2.3 millimeter spoke diameter wire, is stronger than a 14. I use 13 gauge spokes for my big thick Aero spokes and could use fewer spokes and get stronger wheels in terms of spoke failure. The fewer spokes, though, did crack more rims sooner than the wheels with more spokes and 14 gauge. On these particular 13 gauge spokes, the threaded end was buttoned down to 2.0 or 14 gauge, so I could use regular nipples. The weights of the different options vary widely, all the way from a straight 13 gauge, which is 8.5 grams, down to something like a CX Ray, which is 4.1 grams. I also use the Sapim laser spokes, which are also the same weight as a CX Ray. Brass nipples are 1 gram, alloys are 0.3 grams. These weights may not sound like a big deal. The differences may not appear to be great, but remember that in most cases, you're looking at a minimum of 44 spokes and nipples, so it adds up fast. Also remember that spokes act like egg beaters and churn up the air, so fewer spokes makes for more aerodynamic wheels. As long as the spoke is under tension, it's as stiff at low tension as at high tension. That is, the tension of a spoke doesn't affect the stiffness. Both the spoke gauge and the number of spokes affect wheel stiffness, not the spoke tension. In the early days of carbon rim wheels, many pro riders were using 20 spoke rear wheels, but they were so flexible they had to open up the brake pads while climbing. They changed to 24 and didn't have a problem, so that's a good example of how more spokes makes a stiffer wheel. In the past, spokes almost always broke at the bend, and even straight pull spokes occasionally break there. But most broken spokes, in my experience, now break in the middle, especially where the double bedding meets. Steel has come a long way in the last 20 years. One other footnote about tension. It has long been said that high spoke tension is the goal for wheels. Bill Moll, linked below, does a very good job of documenting the reason. Spokes fail by fatigue. With every revolution, spokes tighten and loosen. It is this fatigue cycle that causes spokes to break. Bill documents the fact that wheels with low tension have a greater variance in each cycle than the high tension spokes do, so creating a more acute fatigue cycle. As hard as it is to believe, there are people on YouTube that actually say spokes should never break if the wheel is properly built. Steel spokes fatigue. That's just the deal. Now, it's true that wheels made with 13 gauge spokes have extremely long life, but they are also 9 gram spokes instead of the 4.1 CX Ray. I have successfully used those 13 gauge spokes over and over many times with almost no breakage. But at some point they're going to fatigue and fail. I'm a custom wheel builder. Almost all other custom wheel builders buy branded parts. There is nothing wrong with that. But having hubs and rims made for me, I can change the number of spokes. More precisely, I use 20 whole front wheels and 24 rear wheels for most of my road wheels. In the US, most branded hub and rim makers don't offer those drillings. Fewer spokes makes my wheel both lighter and aerodynamic. There's a link to my website below. So for all you spoke sniffers out there, I hope this video has been of interest. Thanks for watching.